lovers. It is G-Swizz here, and this TBR will self-destruct in 365 days. So I posted a video like this last year and I got around halfway through the TBR. However, I realized during that challenge period that majority of the books I actually just wanted to unhaul. I just wasn't bringing myself to, and I wanted to give them a chance. However, I felt like it was somewhat unfair to keep the books on my shelves and just not read them. But yes, I eventually unhauled them. With the books in this video, however, and for this challenge, I still personally have some interest in these books, but one way or another, they just haven't been prioritized or picked up, and I really need to get a move on with these ones because they're just taking up space on my bookshelves and I want to love them and enjoy them. However, I can't do that if I don't read them. So I'm literally giving myself a deadline with this specific TBR. I need to know whether or not these are worth it. Some of the books on this TBR have been on my TBR for years, and others I've received in my Fairy Loot subscription. I've technically only been subscribed to Fairy Loot for under a year, so it technically hasn't been too long with the Fairy Loot picks. However, at the rate that I'm collecting Fairy Loot monthly editions, I really need to get a move on with them. I guess without further ado, we're gonna go straight into this TBR, and I'm gonna tell you guys why I've put them on the self-destructing TBR, and fingers crossed I can get to them by next year. First off, I have Darkfever by Karen Marie Moaning. I've wanted to read this book series for quite some time. However, I feel like when I think about paranormal dark romance, my mind doesn't instantly jump to Darkfever or wanting to read Darkfever. And I think that has to do with the fact that these are in mass market paperback form. I usually get more excited about the books that are either like the print-on-demand style that I have for some of my independently published books, or maybe some of my special editions that happen to be like fantasy, paranormal romance, but these mass market paperbacks do not excite me. However, I've heard great things about the series, and a lot of people would recommend it to fans of the Mortal Instruments series who are wanting something that's a bit aged up. I think I've had these mass market paperbacks on my shelves for around 2 years now. I need to get a move on with the series, and it's gotta happen, so I'm putting it on this TBR. It's not like I don't want to read it, because I do want to read it. It's just I have no motivation to. I think it's because of the physical format that I own. Unfortunately, I don't really see these books in other formats these days, especially when I go to bookstores. I really have to stop discriminating mass market paperbacks because they're not all that bad. It's just, I think they're just less apparent on my shelves and I don't prioritize them as much. And next up, I have The Power by Naomi Alderman. I have not mentioned this book on my channel for years. I think I mentioned it like 5 years ago when I first hauled it. If you guys want to know exactly when I hauled it, this book was stickered by Kinokuniya on the 12th month of 2017. Thank God I know how to read book stickers based on my book selling experience. I've had this book on my shelf since Boxing Day 2017. It has been over 5 years since I hauled The Power by Naomi Alderman, and I'm pretty sure the new editions don't even have like this Bailey's Prize for Women's Fiction label. Like, I'm pretty sure the label might look different. I really don't know. But this was like an early edition of the book when it first won a prize, and I've wanted to read this book for a while. I have been hesitant though, and the reason why I have been hesitant is because while this book and the purpose of it is meant to convey a feminist message, I hear that it spotlights white feminism rather than intersectional feminism. I've always personally been fascinated in dystopia as well, so that's a big reason why I want to read it. However, it is a pretty scary book when I really think about it, because every woman in this world has the power to electrocute people, and unfortunately people use their powers for evil. That's another reason why I've been scared to pick this one up. Even though it's meant to convey a feminist message, at the very same time it sounds like a pretty scary reality. I was just fascinated in this novel because it was dystopian. I haven't read it yet, and I need to get to it because it has been over 5 years since I've put it onto my TBR. And the next book I put on my self-destructing TBR is The Binding by Bridget Collins. I impulse purchased this edition of The Binding for $5, and I literally only purchased it because one of my friends said that it had a wild ending and they literally could not forget about it. I don't know anything about this book, honestly. I have no motivation to pick it up. I keep on forgetting that I even have it on my shelves, but I impulse purchased it because it was $5. And the cover of the edition I own is actually very unique. It's less boring to me, but at the very same time, I really should have done my research before picking this book up, because as much as it looks pretty on my shelves, I have no motivation to read it. And I'm hoping that putting it on this TBR, I can have some sort of motivation to read it, because if I'm gonna leave it for another year, year, then I might just eventually unhaul it. I don't think I'm at the stage where I will unhaul it straight away, or at least at the stage where I want to unhaul it. I think that this is the perfect time to read it. I've only had it on my shelf for around a year. I purchased it Boxing Day of 2021, so I'm hoping that I will get to this book sometime in 2023, fingers crossed, and hopefully I will love it and the ending will stick with me the way that it stuck with my friend. And the next book series that will self-destruct in a year is the Constellation trilogy by Claudia Gray. I need to give you some context about this. I read Defy the Stars ages ago. Here's the thing, I felt really weird about the AI and human romance. I mean, technically now it doesn't faze me, considering that I ship Wanda and Vision in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Marvel Universe in general, but it kind of did bother me when I first read the series. I was like, oh, that feels very weird. Honestly, it's because this series was my first exposure to it. I didn't love Defy the Stars, the first book, when I first read it, and then Defy the Worlds, when I eventually got to it, I did somewhat enjoy it. And personally, I've forgotten what has happened in the series. I've never gotten to Defy the Fates. And I've kept this series on my shelf for years. This book was stickered in 2018, and they're so pretty. Like, they are absolutely aesthetically pleasing. And I love Claudia Gray's Firebird trilogy. Absolutely adore that trilogy and would recommend it. It's so underhyped. I read that trilogy like 6 years ago now, and I would still recommend it. If you guys did love this trilogy, the Constellation trilogy, I would recommend the Firebird trilogy. And I want to give Claudia Gray more chances. I don't know whether she's still writing or not. I actually have to check and see, because I have not been keeping up with Claudia Gray, but she's an excellent writer based on the Firebird trilogy, so I want to read more works from her, and hopefully I can finish the Constellation trilogy this year. I really have to push myself with this series because it's a series that has always existed on my shelves, but it's just a series that I never really reach for, and I think it's because I haven't really been into space operas for quite some time. Like, yes, I've been reading Jessie Mihalik, but hers are like kind of romantic space operas that are following adults, whereas this is a YA series, so it's definitely probably much more clean. I haven't read a YA sci-fi in a while, so I might try it out again with the Constellation trilogy. And moving to the opposite side of the spectrum, I have a very much new adult paranormal romance. In fact, it's a Why Choose romance. This is the Flirting with Monsters series by Eva Chase. I have had this series on my shelf for 2 or 2.5, maybe 3 years. Around 2.5/3 years ago, I was diving into independently published fantasy paranormal books. I mean, basically, I was just looking at my algorithm and seeing what my algorithm would recommend me, and my algorithm recommended me this series, and it also recommended me the Their Dark Valkyrie series by Eva Chase. So I read Their Dark Valkyrie, but I haven't read Flirting with Monsters yet. And Their Dark Valkyrie, while I did enjoy it and the Why Choose romance, and the fact that it was very much inspired by Norse mythology, this series I'm a little bit more hesitant about because it's not like I have the motivation I had when I was reading the Their Dark Valkyrie series. It was just kind of interesting to see Thor and Loki and Freya in the series. I don't know, I found that more interesting, whereas with this series, like, I know that it's gonna be a good paranormal romance time, but I mean, there's nothing really drawing me to it. I just literally picked these books up because they were recommended to me via my online book buying algorithm. But once again, just like the other books on this list, they have been collecting dust on my shelves. I'm pretty sure the average book is like 300 pages, so these are not going to be long reads at all. I hope to get to them this year. If not, I'm going to have to say goodbye to them. And the next book that will self-destruct in a year is Jade Fire Gold by June CL10. So I purchased this on the Owl Crate website because of their Black Friday sale. I had purchased a few books during that sale, and I wasn't like super interested in this edition, but I got it anyway for the sake of having a special edition. And if you've watched me for a while or you know me very well, you would know that I am hesitant when it comes to fantasy standalones. Like, I love fantasy books, but fantasy standalones really intimidate me because I am unsure as to like whether or not a book is meant to be a standalone or if it's meant to be a series. Because when a good fantasy world has been established, I find it really difficult to say goodbye to the world. But I had purchased this book. This was purely my doing. I have it on my TBR, and I reckon it might be a book worthy of self-destructing if I'm just not gonna get to it. Like, I probably need to pass this on to a loving home because it probably deserves a lot better than someone who is intimidated by it. So I hope to get to Jade Fire Gold sometime this year. I've only really kept it on my shelves because of the fact that it's a special edition, but like, there's not really much special about it except for this book cover where the color is slightly changed and the sprayed pages. I just really need to read it, and I'm really hoping I will find the motivation to within the year. The next book I've put on my self-destructing TBR this year is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. Now, if you might be wondering if you've seen this book on my channel before, it is because that I have read it previously. It's just I've forgotten almost every everything about it, and when I was reading it, it just kept on losing me. I could not pay attention to this book, and I really wish that I could, because it has such an interesting concept. There are embodiments of cities that we follow as characters. I reckon that that is a really cool concept, but the reason why I've put it on this TBR is because The World We Make has just dropped. It has just been published, and I don't have any motivation to buy it and to read it, other than the fact that I really love these covers, and I would want to collect The World We Make in a trade paperback to match the edition of The City We Became that I have. But I can't justify the purchase if I'm not going to read The World We Make, and I can't justify the purchase if I'm not going to reread The City We Became, or at least try to, in order to understand and remember the story at least. And look, I read the 5th season series. As much as I did enjoy that series at the time, it has also escaped my memory somewhat. I think it's because N.K. Jemisin's writing, while it's amazing, it's also very intricate and complex. While some of the story does indeed stick with me, not all of it does. I'm pretty sure I remember much more about the 5th season series than I do about The City We Became, but I want to read The City We Became so that I can make my mind up about The World We Make, because I do want to complete the series. I do want to read it and give N.K. Jemisin's works another chance. I do want to give this book another chance, but if I'm not going to do that within the next year, that means that The World We Make trade paperback will most likely be out of print anyway, so there's no chance of me getting a matching edition of The World We Make anyway, because it will go down in a B format paperback, and there would be no point in collecting the second book if there's no matching edition. Like, maybe I would have to repurchase this in B format paperback in order to dedicate myself to matching editions. Overall, I'm essentially pushing myself to read this book, or reread this book really, within the year, so that I will be able to make the quick decision and purchase the trade paperback of The World We Make in time. And I know that's such a ridiculous reason for putting The City We Became on this TBR, but also it has been 2 years since I've read this book, maybe 3. I really don't remember when The City We Became came out, but it's been a while, and when I read it, I was reading it at my parents' place. That's how I know it has been a long time, because Camilo and I have been leasing this apartment for 2 years so far. And the next book that will self-destruct next year is a book that I actually DNF'd. I wanted to read this book for quite some time, and then when I finally got to it, I just was not paying attention to it, and I really need to push myself to read it, because I also do want to buy the sequel, but I don't want to impulse buy the sequel if I'm not enjoying the first book. And I've heard that the first book is incredible. It made the Goodreads Choice Award nominations of last year. That, my friends, is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. This cover is absolutely stunning, and A Fire Endless also has a very stunning cover. It's just, I can't justify purchasing another beautiful hardback from Waterstones if I'm not gonna get onto this first book first. I do really want to finish off the duology, but I've barely even started it. I got like, I don't know, 20 to 25 pages into this book, and I just thought to myself I could not do it. And I love Rebecca Ross's writing based on Dreams Lie Beneath. Dreams Lie Beneath literally came out a month before A River Enchanted, or a month after. I really don't know, but they came out around the same time, but I believe from different publishers, and they're different categories. One is young adult, and this is an adult series. I love Dreams Lie Beneath, and I would highly recommend it if you were wanting a great fantasy standalone. So I know that Rebecca Ross is going to impress me. Again, it's just I could not invest myself in A River Enchanted when I first picked it up. So I have to give it another chance. Once again, this definitely comes down to me wanting to purchase the sequel, but I do plan on purchasing it one of the next times I do make a Waterstones order. However, I can't technically justify the purchase if I haven't enjoyed A River Enchanted, or if I haven't made a significant dent in it at least. So fingers crossed, this one I will get to within the year, and I'll let you guys know how I go with it if I do. And speaking of beautiful books, I also DNF'd The Darkening by Sonia Mara. I got around, let's say, 15% into this book, and I just gave up on it. As much as I wanted to continue on with it, I felt like it was going to be one of those predictable apocalyptic stories where, I don't know, the main character finds love or whatnot. It's a young adult series. I'm not saying that all young adult series fall under this formula. It's just, it felt a little bit formulaic when I first read it, but I don't want to have those assumptions while reading the entire book. Also, I have this beautiful Fairy Loot edition. It's so pretty, and I've been keeping it on my shelves. However, I'm not really that enthusiastic about it. I attempted to read this book, and I was not enjoying the first 15 minutes. It just felt pretty cliche, young adult, apocalyptic at first, but I'm hoping that this book does surprise me. I do want to give it a second chance. Also, I mean, this edition is absolutely stunning, and I keep it on my like stenciled edge shelf. It's pretty. I can't justify keeping it or purchasing maybe a sequel from Fairy Loot if I haven't yet read it. I don't know whether this is a standalone or whether or not there's going to be a sequel to the series, but what I do know is that if Fairy Loot are going to be printing and publishing the sequel, then I want to at least love this book before considering purchasing it. And the other fairy loot book that will self-destruct within a year if I don't get to it anytime soon is Violet Made of Thorns by Gina Chen. Now, I believe this book came in my fairy loot the month after The Darkening did, and I just didn't really have any motivation to get to it. I really need the motivation to get to it because I'm hearing good things about this book. I'm just a little bit hesitant. I think it's because that the book is a little short and I don't know whether it's going to be a duology or a trilogy. I mean, we will find out together. I don't know. Every single time I look at this book, I think to myself, I could read it. I could down that book easily, but I have no motivation to. I have a feeling that it's going to disappoint me. And maybe it's because The Darkening just wasn't doing it for me the month that I read it. So then I just thought to myself, okay, the next fairy loot book is not going to be interesting either. I don't know. I think ever since I read This Vicious Grace, and that was a fairy loot book pick, I was blown away by it. And for some reason, I thought to myself, maybe every book from fairy loot is going to be like this. And I really have to stop looking at my fairy loot books like that. I really do need to get it into my noggin that as much as fairy loot put young adult fantasy sci-fi books in their boxes, it does not mean that every single one of them are the same. They are literally distributing from different publishers and from different authors. Not all of them are going to be for everyone. So I have to understand that. With Violet Made of Thorns, I've just looked at this book and I've wanted to read it in some way, but at the very same time, every single time I reach for it, I have to put it back on my shelf. I can't be doing that this year. I have to make my mind up as to whether or not I would purchase the sequel from fairy loot or not if they decide to publish the sequel as well. So this book will self-destruct within a year, meaning that if I don't purchase the sequel and if I can't motivate myself to purchase the sequel, then I'm going to have to unhaul it. And finally, the last book I've put on my self-destructing TBR is a book/series that is long overdue. This book and series has been on my TBR since I read the original trilogy that this book series spins off from. I've actually unhauled the original trilogy because as much as I loved the first two books in that trilogy, the third book was terrible in my opinion, and I don't understand why people say it's the best finale ever. It was anticlimactic and the love interest was toxic. Like, I really don't understand why people put him on a pedestal. He's terrible. Anyway, you guys might just catch my drift here. I need to read the Dance of Thieves duology, or at least the first book this year, because I've had this book series on my shelf for years. I know that there are people hunting down these hardbacks. I mean, they're being published in paperback at the moment, but so many people are desperate for these hardbacks, and I am just selfishly holding onto them. I've attempted to read Dance of Thieves. I attempted to read it 6 months after reading The Beauty of Darkness, and I was just angry when I first started it because all the wounds that The Beauty of Darkness left me with reopened. Like, I thought I was healed, but no, I was not healed. I attempted to read this book 2 years ago, and I just could not do it. I was so angry. I was so mad, and I was just thinking about Prince Wraith all the time. I hate Prince Wraith. Prince Rafferty could truly go F himself, but I know that we're not necessarily following him. We're not following the main cast of characters. In this series, we are following a new set of characters, but the characters that we've seen in the Remnant Chronicles previously will make appearances, especially because some of them are reigning at the moment, so that totally makes sense. However, hearing about the locations in this series and hearing about like the previous events from the first, I don't know, 10 pages that I read from this book, I immediately had to put it down because I was just so angry at the time. But now it has been 2.5 years, around 2.5 years since I've read The Beauty of Darkness. How funny is that? It's been 2.5 years since I've read that book. I read it at my parents' place when I was staying there with my husband. It's just so funny because time has flown by and there hasn't been a day where I've been able to forgive that book. It's hilarious. That's literally a quarter of a decade. However, because that much time has passed, I'm hoping that I can push past what I did not like about The Beauty of Darkness and truly enjoy the Dance of Thieves duology. Because it's been a long time coming, I've had this duology on my shelves for around 3 years now, and they've just been sitting here collecting dust. They are beautiful books. Yes, I'm not gonna lie. I just really hope that I'm not disappointed in this duology like I'm disappointed in The Beauty of Darkness. Leah deserves justice, even though she's probably not gonna get it through this series. I really cannot forgive Prince Wraith for his attitude in The Beauty of Darkness whatsoever, and I really need to push past that because I really do need to move on. And yes, I personally need to take time to read something else from Mary E. Pearson. I really want to give her another shot because I loved the first 2 books in the Remnant Chronicles. I'm really hoping that these 2 books, this duology, will capture the magic of at least the first 2 books in the Remnant Chronicles and not have the same energy as the third. I'm really scared about this. You guys can tell, like, I'm literally stalling while talking about this book. This is probably the most intimidating out of the entire TBR. And I mean, some of them aren't even in genres that I usually read. This is a genre that I usually read and I would usually enjoy. It's just I have so much resentment from reading The Beauty of Darkness. So fingers crossed, this will go over okay. So I guess it's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. My self-destructing TBR. Wow, I cannot believe we're here again. I'm going to wish myself the best of luck for this year, and I really hope that I can read these and potentially find new faves. But if I don't find new faves and if I don't read them, they're gonna have to go in my unhaul pile. If you happen to stay till the end of the video, leave me the sparkly emoji because I just need a little bit of sparkle right now, maybe to get me excited about this TBR. And if you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Join the amazing community of book lovers. And also I have social media. I'm at GSwizzleBooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/GSwizzle. And finally, I'm at TikTok. I'm at GSwizzle on TikTok if you want to follow me there for some bookish content. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it into double. Started out with half and I flipped it into double.